Oscar Valdez, plus 300 underdog. Hit that like button as you come in. It's what makes boxing a beautiful sport. You get these upsets. Beautiful track. Hit that like button as you come in. Let's get this party started. Oscar Valdez. That's the guy we're talking about. What a fight. What a fight. And I'm already seeing it out there, man. I'll tell you right now, I do not want to see it. I don't want to see the revisionist history. Don't want to see it. On Friday night, Berchelt was a killer. He was a murderer. He was a savage. There's no way he'll be able to take Berchelt's shots. There's no way he's going to be able to walk through them. On Saturday, Berchelt rehydrates all the way to 146.5. How in the world is Oscar Valdez going to walk through those shots? How is he going to defeat a full-blown welterweight on fight night? How is he going to do it? I'll tell you how he did it. He showed you on Saturday night. Beautiful, beautiful performance. And what we thought coming in was that we would see a war, a possible fight of the year. Instead, what we got was a possible performance of the year. I mean, what we got was a guy who was seriously undervalued as a fighter. A guy who was seriously avoided at 126, and now we know why. Now we know why Valdez was avoided at 126. And while he'll likely be avoided at 130 for a while as well, I don't buy that he's going to fight Shakur Stevenson next. I don't buy that they're going to be ready to put Stevenson in with Valdez after that performance. They weren't so ready to put Stevenson in with them at 126. But what a performance. What a performance. What did Valdez do in this fight to be successful? Straight out the gate, and let's talk about this. The two questions I had on Friday night when me and Tree were on here were, and we both picked Valdez to win the fight. I'm not going to act like I'm Nostradamus or anything like that. It was just based off of instinct. I saw this as a toss-up fight coming in. I didn't understand the odds plus 300. I was very surprised that Valdez was such a big dog coming into this fight. Didn't quite get that, but I'm not going to act like I'm some genius because I thought this was a toss-up fight and I just leaned Valdez last minute. But two questions I had. Number one, how long will Valdez be able to box and buy himself time before this starts off into a war? Will he be able to successfully box early in the fight? He answered that question right out the gate. He was able to box, use his angles. As soon as his back touched those ropes, what did he do? He spun off. Not only did he spin off, he threw a shot as he spun off, circled around, rinse and repeat, reset, start boxing again. What did he do? He disguised that left hand beautifully. Beautifully. He was using the jab not as a defensive mechanism, which we all thought coming into the fight that he would be using the jab as a defense mechanism, not as an offensive weapon, but as a defensive weapon. We thought he'd be using the jab to fend off Berchelt, to keep some space, to buy himself some time. Instead, what we got was bop, bop, Sorry if I was too loud with that. What we got was offense with the jab. And not only that, he was able to disguise that jab and turn it into a hook. So Berchelt didn't know if the shot was coming straight or Berchelt didn't know if the shot was coming wide. And what happened? Berchelt would move that right hand to start guarding from the jab and was leaving the side open. Berchelt was tagging him with it all night long. Boom, boom, boom. That left hook was a thing of beauty, an absolute thing of beauty in this fight. He had so much success early in the fight with the initial knockdown. Berchelt was in a lot of trouble, The sixth round, I believe it was, Berchelt started coming on a little bit. It was either 6 or 7. And I gave Berchelt a round or two, maybe 2 rounds. I don't remember. I know for sure 1. I think it was the 7th round. Maybe 2, but I think just 1. But what happened? Berchelt started to show a second wind and come on a little bit. And it turned out to be his last stand is what it was. But Valdez sort of looked confused for a little bit in that round. And Berchelt started to show a full head of steam, was coming on strong, was backing Valdez up. And you started to get, for that round and a half, I'd say it was a round and a half, you started to get flashbacks of Cotto Margarito 1, in which, oh man, he should have finished him. He had a chance. Maybe he should have stopped him. Maybe his window closed. And you started to see Berchelt have some success as he moved downhill for that round and a half. And Valdez was going backwards and started showing movement. But really what was happening was Valdez was just figuring it out. He was like, okay, this guy's got a second win. He's throwing punches now. He's coming forward. Let me figure this out. And by the end of that, I believe it was the 7th round, he really figured it out. And he caught Berchelt with another huge shot at the end of that round. It was either the end of the 7th or the end of the 8th. Caught him with a big shot. And Berchelt never got his legs back after that. Never. Then he got the second knockdown. And then, dude, when I say Berchelt ran into that shot, he literally ran into that shot. Like literally. He was running in towards the end of that round when he got caught with that left hand. Running in. Yes, homeboy took too much punishment. He took a lot of punishment, and more on that in a minute. Whether there should be a stoppage, I know a lot of people were saying the stoppage should have come earlier from his corner. The corner's you got to be able to save a guy from himself because he's not gonna stop. He's just not gonna stop. A guy like Berchelt is not gonna stop until you plank him, and that's what happened. Unfortunately, dude has a lot of heart. Absolutely. You're not going to see me bad-mouthing Berchelt. Not going to see me bad-mouthing him. And that's the reason at the beginning I said I don't want to see revisionist history, because before this fight, Berchelt was a monster, a savage, a beast. Everybody was hyping him up. So after this fight, you don't say, oh, Berchelt isn't who we thought he was. No. The right way to look at that is Valdez came in and destroyed a beast. Berchelt is still a beast. He was a beast going into this fight. We lift Valdez up. Valdez had a career performance. Valdez was undervalued as a fighter. Valdez was a hidden gem because nobody at 126 wanted to fight this guy. So none of the casuals, even a lot of hardcore boxing fans, were not able to give this guy the correct eye test because he hasn't been in there with the top guys because they have been avoiding him until Berchelt stepped up to the plate at 130. Career performance by Valdez. Incredible performance. But what was super impressive about this stoppage was he did it going backwards. How many guys have punching power moving backwards? How many guys have that punch placement moving backwards? He threw that shot going backwards. Knockout punch, knockout of the year, likely. We're only in February, but it's going to be tough to beat that one. He threw it going backwards off his back foot. like that. Perfect placement. And yes, Berchelt ran into it, but perfect placement on that shot. What a performance by Valdez from start to finish. I'm glad he had those little bit of, I'm glad there was that round and a half of, Berchelt's coming on here. Maybe Valdez lost his moment because it showed us a little bit of vulnerability in Valdez for that round and a half, and then he overcame it and then just iced the dude. I mean, what a performance. Do you question Valdez punching power? Valdez amazing, but I don't. I don't, especially after that knockout. No, I think Valdez, what it is with Valdez is he can switch it up on you. He's like a change up pitcher, but he's got a fastball. He's got a fastball, and he showed that in that 10th round. I mean, it's the punches you don't see that hurt you. And I think we saw in this fight, we were questioning, okay, is the boxing ability improving while he's under Reynoso? And now I think we see it. His boxing ability has improved. Incredible boxer. And this win puts him up there, man. It puts him up there. I don't know where you put him. Do you put him in top 10 pound for pound? Probably too early to tell that. But he put everybody on notice at 130. And what a Shark Tank those divisions right there are becoming. 135 was just already a Shark Tank. But just south of that at 130, you got these guys, these killers starting to develop at 130, and Valdez throws his name in that as well. I mean, you got guys like, you can make a fight with Tank Davis in the future, but Shakur Stevenson is the fight that they're talking about immediately. I have my doubts on whether they'll put Shakur Stevenson in there with Valdez right after this fight. I still think the move for Shakur Stevenson is going to be the fight between Frampton and God, I forget his name off the top of my head. I'll get that later on in the show. He'll probably beat Frampton, to be honest, the American fighter. God, I forget his name. But that fight, I think that Shakur Stevens is going to get the winner of that fight. I don't think the Valdez fight's coming right away. I just don't see it. But I hope it does. And I think Shakur Stevenson will have a tough time with Valdez. Valdez showed everything in that fight. Boxing ability, movement, and punching power. And the beautiful thing about it was much like Shane Mosley when he fought Margarito. Once your rope backs touch those ropes, you spin off or you clinch and you get out of there and you throw a shot he was throwing that quick shot as he spun off the ropes and then spun around, rinse and repeat, start fresh. Valdez had the most success when he led with punching power, when he led with power punches. Right? For that round and a half where Berchelt had success, he had success because he was first. Then Valdez figured that out. He's like, I got to stop this guy in his tracks. I can't let this turn into Cotto Margarito 1. I can't let this guy get a full head of steam coming forward. I either have to stop him in the middle of the ring. Once my back touches the ropes, that's when he's going to get his shots off. I got to get out of there. Let's see what time. GT4. I love Valdez, but Shakur outby. I don't think so, dude. I would disagree with you on that. I think Valdez has superb boxing ability. And from what I hear, the rumors are Stevenson's chin isn't great, but Valdez will test that. Valdez is going to test that. So I would respectfully disagree with that one, but who knows, man? Maybe Stevenson would. That would be Stevenson's performance, his big night if he were outboxed Valdez. Who is next for Valdez for me? I don't know. He would obviously defend, so whoever the mandatory would be. I haven't looked into that yet, but I just don't know if it's going to be Stevenson. I think they're going to let that one breathe a little bit, but I hope I'm wrong. I would love nothing more to be wrong on than to be wrong on that and to get Valdez versus Stevenson next. But I just thought that was a great performance, particularly what what Valdez did with his left hand in that fight because he just disguised it well. Like I said at the top, he used the jab not as a defensive mechanism, but as an offensive weapon. Boom, boom, snapped his neck back, used it as a power punch, and then um, disguised his left hook by making it look like a jab. Berchelt thought that shot was coming straight forward, and then he landed the hook. Boom, boom, boom. That was his punch of the night, was that left hook. It was just a thing of beauty. Thing of beauty. And the boxing ability as well. As soon as he touched the rope, he got out of there. But I thought it was good how he led off with power punches. He let a lot of guys in that situation. You're up that much in the fight. You'll take a little bit off your punches. Play it safer. Use a jab more as a defensive mechanism. Use a lot of lateral movement. But he saw that wasn't going to be the play that night. I could get this guy out of here and make it easier for myself if I sit on these punches and put everything into these punches and lead off with that. When he was first, Berchelt didn't know what to do with that. Berchelt's just not used to that, man. He's not used to being outdone with output. This is a guy who throws 80 punches per round with power. And he looked robotic in there. Maybe he went to the 130-pound well too many times. You can maybe throw that out there. Looked robotic, straight lines, a little slow, but that could be just facing a quicker opponent who has punching power. But when you rehydrate to 146.5 from 130 overnight, maybe it's time to move to 135. I don't know. Because it's not like a 160-pounder gaining 16 and a half pounds overnight. You're talking about a 130-pounder gaining that much weight overnight. That's a lot of weight to gain for a 130-pounder. Appreciate that, man. Thoughts on Reynoso's work with Valdez? I think it's paying dividends. And that was the question coming in as well. That was another question coming in is, how much is Reynoso improving this guy's work? I'd say if you saw Valdez a couple of years ago compared to Valdez now, I think it's safe to say Reynoso's helping him. I think if you see Reynoso's work recently, not only improvements Canelo's making, which we'd all agree that Canelo has made big improvements in his career and his boxing ability, Ryan Garcia's improvements, and now Oscar Valdez's improvements. Man, Reynoso has he's making an early statement for a trainer of the year. I would say that. So and not only that, how much does it rub off on you mentally being around champions? Like, you're around Canelo a lot, and Canelo is arguably the pound for pound king. Canelo carries himself well. Canelo carries himself like a champion. He has discipline, wants to fight the best, wants to be active, wants to fight 4 or 5 times a year. He's talking about fighting 5 times in 12 months, 4 times in 2021. When you're around a guy like that, that greatness rubs off on you. Not only in sports, but in life. You want to be around winners. So you're around winners, it elevates your game. And the fact that Reynoso is attracting winners, I can't say anything but good things about Reynoso, and in that I think it's working out for Valdez very well. So overall, man, I just left that fight Saturday night after I watched it just thinking, man, this is what boxing is about. If we could have more nights like this in boxing, this would not be a cult sport. This would not be a cult following. This would be a mainstream sport. This is what it's about. Champions taking on top opposition, avoided fighters. Valdez was an avoided fighter. Berchelt didn't need to take that fight, and he did. Valdez tested himself against a beast in Berchelt that nobody wanted to fight. And it ended in knockouts. A lot of those fights on that card, and we'll get to a couple more of them later, they ended in knockouts. The fans want to see knockouts. The fans want to see fighters trying to be great. And it gave us that as well. And it gave us that moment of a scary moment where Berchelt hits the canvas face first, then he lays on his back and he's not responsive. So it's scary. So it shows you what these guys lay on the line. And then a minute later, he sits up and then Valdez goes up to him after he celebrates and, they have their moment. And that's that moment that the Warriors have together, and nobody will ever understand what those two guys just went through together with each other except those two guys. That's what makes this sport the best. When boxing is done right, there's nothing that can touch it. Nothing. And I'm one of those guys that's a fan of multiple sports. I love the three major sports. I watch soccer when something's on the line with it. I watch golf. I watch tennis. But nothing touches boxing when it's done right. Nothing. Nothing. And that's what Saturday night showed us. I wish we can have 20, 30, 40 weekends like that a year in boxing, and nothing would touch this sport. Nothing. And it takes great warriors to be able to pull it off, and Valdez is that. And we have to start talking about, we just undervalued this guy tremendously as a fighter. Berchelt wasn't overvalued. Berchelt was valued correctly, but we just undervalued Valdez. He was not a plus 300 underdog. He was just a guy who was avoided at 126, never had his big fight. He got it, and he capitalized on it. Oscar has shortened the left hook a lot since he left Manny. Yeah. You look at what that's a good comparison there. You look at what Canelo does disguising the left hand, and you look at what Valdez does now disguising the left hand. He disguised it beautifully. And I love how he used that jab as an offensive weapon, and not just to keep this guy off of him. Man, what a performance by Valdez. I'm looking forward to seeing what he does in the future. Let's get on to a couple other things. Broner does F it up. We'll get on Broner in a minute. And it's not going to be long on Broner because there's really not much left to say about that guy. But I want to touch on Gabe Flores. I thought Gabe Flores against Valdez, because I said Friday night when I talked to Tree about this fight that was going to be a sneaky fight for Flores, because Valdez is a guy who is a clever, tough veteran. He's the consummate great gatekeeper. He's the guy that you put, if you want this guy, if he's any type of fighter, he's got to get past a guy like Valdez to get to that top level. Perfect gatekeeper. And Flores was the most successful fighter against Valdez up to this point. He was more impressive than Valdez was against him. And by the way, the fighter I wanted to mention earlier was Jamel Herring. I don't know how I forgot that one, but he's a guy who's a possibility for Shakur Stevenson next instead of Valdez. And I think, man, I hope I'm wrong. I hope we see Valdez Stevenson next. But I'll believe it when I see it. But as far as Flores is another guy you throw in the mix in those lower weight classes, 130, 135, just becoming a shark tank. And these guys, it's going to be hard to maneuver around those weight classes without avoiding each other. It's going to be tougher and tougher to avoid each other when you have more of these guys just popping up in those weight classes. And Flores is another one you have to watch out for. I felt the first 5 rounds, he looked decent, but what it was, and he said in the post-fight, is he was just feeling him out. He was playing with his food. And I tend to believe him. I think he was playing it safe a little bit until he found that big shot, and he landed it. And boy, did he land it. And that's the big question I wanted answered from Flores, because if you look at Flores' record, going into this fight, he was 19-0 with 6 KOs. That's a small KO percentage. But another way to look at it is, you generally, when a guy has that low of a KO percentage that early in his career, Either he's feather fisted like a Paulie Malignaggi, or he's been matched tough. And I think, as far as Flores, it's that. I think he's been matched tougher. And this showed that he has punching power. He answered that correctly because Valdez is a guy who has a chin, and Flores flattened him. He flattened him. Get a background, Calix. Hey, man, you don't like that? I got some hair weaves back there. Not mine, by the way. And some cushions drying right there. Yeah, man, I'm working on that. That's next. I got the camera, got the mic. The background is next. But, yeah, man, I thought Flores looked great as well. Played with his food a little bit, as he said. Played a little safe. Softened him up a little bit. And then showed that he has punching power, which people did not think that he had with the KO, with the small KO percentage he had. He showed that he had, and that's the last question he really had to answer before he stepped up. Now he showed that he can knock guys out. He showed his boxing ability already. We all knew he had that. So he's another guy you throw in the mix. Like I said, man, those weight classes right there, 130, 135, those lower weight classes, is going to be tough for these guys to avoid each other without there being excuses. I haven't watched the Josh Kelly fight. That's next. Unfortunately, I wasted some time watching the Broner fight. More on that in a minute. But I want to touch on Flores, man. I thought that was a good performance by him, and he answered one of the last questions we had about him with the punching power. I'm excited to see what's next for that kid as well. I hope they just keep him busy. Just keep him busy. Keep him in the ring. Keep that ring rust off. Xander Zayas is another guy I was looking forward to watching, and I was impressed with him as well. The body work that kid puts in at 18 years old. For a young kid to have to be that ready to go to the body. He was just digging into the body. Boxing ability, working off the jab, went to the body with both hands. I'm looking forward to Zayas as well in his future in the career. He's one of those guys that it's tough there's a lot of gray area on who's a prospect, who's a contender. But if you consider him a prospect, he's one of those guys that could be prospect of the year in 2021. Another guy you want to keep active. Keep that kid active. Fight him again in April or May. Preferably April. Fight him 4 or 5 times this year. Keep him active. That's a kid to look out for. 18 years old and to show that ring IQ, going to the body, digging into the body. He has killer instinct, boxing ability. Love what's going on with that kid. The only one that I wasn't really impressed with, to be honest, on that card was Elvis Rodriguez. I'm not seeing with him that a lot of other people are seeing. You know, I don't know what it is. A lot of people are high on him. I just don't see it. I think his ceiling is a lot lower than the other guys we mentioned. A lot lower than a Gabe Flores. A lot lower than a Xander Zayas. A lot lower than the champions were, like an Oscar Valdez or Berchelt. Those guys, when they were at that point in their career. I just think that Elvis's ceiling is a lot lower. I just don't see anything special with him, to be honest. Just me. But Otto Wallen versus Brazil. Otto Wallen showing that he's possibly a top 10 heavyweight. I would put him in there right now. His only loss is to Tyson Fury. And he was a competitive in that fight. Showed a lot of good things. Otto Wallen's a guy you start to mention in those top fights at heavyweight. Do you put him in with a Deontay Wilder? Somebody like that. His only loss is Tyson Fury, and it was a tough fight. So good for him. He's coming off a win as well. But Adrian Broner, I know people want to hear me give my thoughts on that. I heard a lot of people saying that they felt there was a robbery, that Broner lost the fight. I'm going to be quite honest with you. I'm at the point in my life where if a fight doesn't intrigue me by like round 6 or 7, I talked about that with the Caleb Plant fight. Once it hit round 6 and I saw where it was going to where it was going to be a Caleb Plant 12-round wide decision, he wasn't really going for the knockout. I turned on the Nintendo Switch. Me and my son started playing that, and I kept the fight on because I wanted to see the post-fight interview. But with Broner, I watched the fight the next day, and I had other things going on Sunday because the Valdez fight was going to be the fight I watched. I was not watching. I was not going to have two TVs on. I wanted my attention, my full attention on the Valdez Berchelt fight. So I watched the Broner fight the next day, and I turned it off in round 7 or 8. I just couldn't. There was nothing special about what was going on. Santiago was right there with him. I thought it was what and what through round 7 and 8. I thought it was a what and what fight. I already knew the decision. So if the decision was in question, I would have kept watching the fight. But I already knew from the night before that Broner won a decision. I thought it was a close fight going through 7 or 8. So I can't tell you who I thought won the fight because I did not watch rounds 8 through 12 because it was just, I didn't get anything new. It's the same assessment I gave on Friday night when Tree and I were talking about it. Broner has a style that inferior opposition is going to stay in fights with him because he's so inconsistent in there. And he's talented enough to where he can stay in there with superior opposition and raise his game. However, I'm starting to question that part of it because watching him fight those first 7, 8 rounds against Santiago, a guy who he should have destroyed if he's any type of fighter, a guy who is a true 140 pounder. Broner couldn't make weight at 140, so they raised the fight. They changed the whole weight class 2 nights before the fight. So it became a welterweight fight. So Broner had a weight advantage already. But this is a guy, if you're any type of fighter, you style on a guy like this. And Broner just didn't have it. He just didn't have. I'm watching this fight through 7 or 8 rounds. I'm like, and I started to change my tune because Friday night when we were talking about it, I said, it's good when Broner's around because it gives you something to talk about. Pre-fight, post-fight, but during the fight, and he gives you good fights. He's had heart in the past. But in this fight, there was just nothing there for me. He just looked like, it just looked blah to me. It looked like a mediocre fighter. And you worry about that. Has he entered Chavez Jr. territory to where Chavez Jr. was intriguing for a while? He was weight bullying, but he was still beating some decent middleweights. He gave you entertainment value before and after fights. But as he started to deteriorate as a fighter, and you just saw, this is just a decent fighter at this point with a name. When that happens, when everybody starts to realize that, the before and after fight stuff starts to devalue. It starts to wilter to where you don't really care about that stuff as much. And I think we're getting there with Broner because as I'm watching this fight, I'm like, I don't really care what he says after the fight. What can he say after the fight that's going to get me intrigued after watching this? So I think we're at that point with Broner where he's not going to beat anybody of value at 147. I think we all see that. And then after the fight, I hear he's calling out the top guys at 140 and saying he wants to fight at 140. Well, dude, you had months to make 140 in this fight, and you didn't make it. You didn't even come close. So how is it you're going to get down to 140 and beat a guy like Regis Prograis or somebody like that? You're going to completely drain yourself down to get to 140. There's not going to be anything left of you if you make it down to 140. You're going to be a skeleton. You're going to completely dehydrate yourself. So that's where I'm at with Broner. It's like, where is he? I remember Gotti late in his career, Arturo Gotti saying, I'm a fighter without a division at this point. I can't make 140 anymore, and I just can't compete at 147. It was one of the truest things I've ever heard a fighter say. And he retired after he made that statement. He's like, I'm a fighter without a weight class. I think Broner's there. Broner's a guy without a weight class. He can't compete with the top guys at 147. He can't make 140. I think if he can make 140, he would have made it in this fight. How is he going to get down to 140 and be competitive when there's nothing left of him if he makes 140? How's he going to be the prograde when he completely dehydrates himself? But as I was saying, the other stuff, the pre-fight, post-fight stuff starts to wilter once you see that someone's just an average fighter. It happened to Chavez Jr. Once the Chavez Jr. shenanigans started happening, he started to lose fights. He wasn't beating decent middleweights anymore. He was just losing fights and looking bad. The post-fight and the pre-fight stuff, he just didn't care about anymore. And maybe we're there with Broner now. We just don't care. That's where I was on Sunday when I was watching the fight. I don't care what he says after the fight now. I wasn't impressed with what he did in the ring, so I don't really care what he says after he gets out of the ring. And I changed my tune on that from Friday night, because on Friday night I said it's good for him to be back. And maybe it still is. Maybe it still is, but I think he's gatekeeper status now. I don't think he's going to demand the money and the attention that he got before if he's putting out performances like this. Because what I saw against Santiago was nothing. I didn't see any. Santiago he's a guy you should style on if you're any type of good fighter. And he didn't do that. It was just blah. Through 7 and 8 rounds, when I turned the fight off, it was an even fight. And Broner wasn't showing me anything new. If anything, it got a little worse. He just looked like an average fighter in there. And it was sad to see. It really was, because I was hoping he put up a good performance, give us something to talk about. But we just didn't get that. It was just blah. Especially, and maybe it looked like that even more so after watching Berchelt versus Valdez. Because you come from that high, and then the next day you watch Broner Santiago, and it's like, what is this? You know what I'm saying? Like, you watch Valdez put on an incredible performance against a great fighter, against a guy who is much bigger than him. And then you watch this guy who misses weight. They contractually changed the weight class. He has a weight advantage against this guy who isn't anywhere close to the top 10 at junior welterweight. And he looks like that. Just don't see it, man. I don't see it. Look, if Broner's around, good. I think overall, still, I would say he's a net positive to the sport. He gives you a gatekeeper with a name. He'll still be in the headlines. But am I a little less excited? A lot less excited about him than I was Friday night? Yes. Absolutely. Absolutely. Shout out Mr. Boxing today. When Broner gets stopped, that's when it's really the end for him. Yeah. Shout out Boxing Dialogue. I hope it's not an ugly ending for him, man. I really don't. I don't wish bad on anybody. I was the guy when Berchelt, even though I was cheering for Valdez and wanted him to win the fight and picked him to win the fight, when Berchelt hit the canvas like that, man, it all goes out the window. You just hope that guy gets up. So I don't hope for Broner's downfall or anything like that. I've never been that type of guy, but I think we all see it coming down the road if he continues. I think there's only one way for that story to end. I hope I'm wrong. I wasn't impressed with anything he did. But to recap this thing, man, I just wanted to hit on Valdez once again. Pause. Berchelt versus Valdez, incredible. We went into it thinking it was going to be a war, possible fight of the year. It was a war in a way. I'm glad Berchelt had that round and a half of success, and Valdez showed that he could come off of that adversity, weather that storm, and knock out Berchelt on the other end of that. So it wasn't all bad for Berchelt. He showed a lot of heart. But this was all Valdez. It was performance of the year for Valdez. He has staked his claim in February that it's going to be tough to beat this performance. And look, if he puts out one or two more performances like that, you have a fighter of the year possibility in Oscar Valdez. after watching that fight, you say, is this guy, we know he was undervalued coming into this fight. That's for sure because the Vegas odds were plus 300 and he won the fight. So obviously he was severely overvalued. But was he that severely overvalued to where not only is this guy arguably the best 130 pounder, and a lot of people coming in the fight were saying he's fringe top 5 130 pounder. But now, is he possibly, maybe on that fringe of top 10 pound for pound? That's the type of performance he put up in this fight. And once again, I don't want to see the revisionist history on Berchelt. Everybody was saying this guy was a monster coming in. Nothing has changed from Friday night. That guy was a monster on Saturday night still when he stepped in the ring. 146.5 pounds of Terminator coming at Oscar Valdez. And Valdez dealt with it. He dealt with it. Give Valdez all the credit in the world. I don't want to hear anything else. Anything else. Give that guy credit for what he did. And I'll speak on it one more time. The left hand. And I would say that's all Reynoso because Canelo does the same type of things. Yeah, he's got the egg weights. He's got the egg weights. D-Style, you think he's got the egg weights? Look, man, how he disguised that left hand in this fight. You see Canelo do it. It's the Reynoso in him. He used that jab not as a defensive mechanism. He used it as an offensive weapon. And then he disguised the left hook as a jab. So Berchelt thought that left hand was coming straight up the middle when it was coming from the side. That left hook was landing at will because he was disguising that left hand as that left hook as a jab. Beautiful, beautiful performance. And I can't state it enough as well. As soon as his back touched that ropes, he spun off. He didn't stay there. He spun off. Threw a shot as he spun off. Went on the other side, rinse and repeat. I'll say it again. When Berchelt had success in this fight, it was when he led off for that round and a half. Berchelt was first. Berchelt had a full head of steam coming forward. Valdez was going backwards using lateral movement, but he was not throwing first. Towards the end of that 7th or the end of the 8th round, whichever one it was, towards the end of that round and a half, Valdez started leading again and leading with power shots. And that's when he had success. And that's when he turned the fight again because at the end of that 7th or 8th round, whichever one it was, he landed a big shot and Berchelt was never the same after that shot landed. Go back and watch the fight. When Valdez led with power shots is when he had success in that fight. And he knew it. He could have went the other way with it. He could have used the jab after Berchelt was coming on as a defensive mechanism, used lateral movement, clinched a lot, and tried to coast to a decision. But instead, he was smart. He knew he would have more success and add more entertainment value too, by the way, if he led with those power shots and get this guy out of there. And that's what he did. And the last thing that I said that was most impressive about him was he landed that shot going backwards. And it helped that Berchelt ran forwards, which you don't do. Berchelt literally ran right into that shot. It's like running into a brick wall. He ran into that shot, but that doesn't take away from the fact that Valdez landed the knockout of the year. It's only February, I know, but it's going to be tough to beat that one, going backwards. So he has punching power going backwards as well. He can box, he can punch, he can do it all. It's going to be tough to beat this guy. It's going to be tough to beat this guy. Here come the excuses. Yeah. Shout out D-Style. Look forward to that pie in the face tomorrow night. Great show, Hispanics Causing Panic. Go check them out. Man, y'all got them guests tomorrow night. I look forward to that. Gabe Flores on there, Teofimo Lopez Sr. Look forward to seeing that. Valdez's glove was too floppy. Like, yeah. Berchelt was likely concussed. That's for sure. But look, let's not write off Berchelt. Hope he comes back. Heard he got out the hospital, got a clear bill from the doctor. So let's see what happens with Berchelt going forward. But it's all about Valdez right now. Look, man, y'all hit me up. Hit that like button. Hit that sub button. If you're on Twitter, if you're on YouTube, Calix Boxing 2.0. Or actually, I'm Calix Boxing 2 on Twitter. So if you're on Twitter, hit me up there. This has been Calcast 10, man. Appreciate it. Love chopping it up with y'all. I'll catch up with y'all tomorrow night with Calcast 11, and we'll be talking Canelo. It's Canelo fight week. Yeah, we're talking about Oscar Valdez, but this is Canelo fight week. More Reynoso. We'll be talking about Canelo tomorrow night. I'm out. Peace.